Happy New Year. And thank you for entertaining us by coming in to Helena and for the start of the big kickoff to the legislative session, right, in a really awkward time, right? I mean, this is kind of a brutal time, and I want you to know this is not entirely our fault, because constitutionally, the legislature is mandated to meet on the first Tuesday following the first year. And so we always have the kickoff event, and so that meant we started today. If there's any consolation at all, I looked already into 2025, which is when we'll have our next legislative session. And the 2025 legislative session starts on January 7th. So big reprieve from what we've had to go through here over the last couple of days, and we thank you for all being here. My name's Todd O'Hare. I'm the president and CEO of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, and it's a real honor to have all of you with us here today. It's not uncommon that we sell out business days at the Capitol, particularly in a legislative session year, right? That's not really uncommon. What is uncommon is the speed at which we sold it out this year. We sold out business days at the Capitol this year around November 10th. We didn't even have all of our speakers secured when we sold it out. And I think that speaks to the caliber of this event. I think it speaks to the enthusiasm and the excitement for this upcoming legislative session and the hope that this is going to be one of the better pro-business legislative sessions that we've had in recent memory. So thank you for being part of it. Now, as we get started, there's a lot of work that goes into this. This is one of the Montana Chamber's big signature events, and there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that goes into it. And I don't know if our entire chamber team is in the room. I see a couple, but I'd like to introduce to you some of the folks that are responsible for pulling this together. I have to start with Diamond D. Everybody knows Diamond D. Duran, right? She's been with the chamber for up on 40 years now, right? She's been here for a long time. She's out there at the front desk. James Easton's the big burly guy there in the back. He's acting as the bouncer, right? Thanks, James Easton. And James is responsible for bringing our youth entrepreneur program into high schools around the state. And so James is a lot on the road, meeting with teachers and business leaders in communities, introducing the youth entrepreneur program into those. So if you have any questions or need anything during the next 24 hours, he's a good one to start with. And then if you need anything after that with regard to encouraging youth entrepreneurs into your local community, James is a good one for that. Charles Robison, I saw Charles a little bit early. Charles is doing our government affairs. There's Charles right over here. He's leading our lobbying effort here this legislative session. Sheridan Johnson, brand new to the Montana Chamber team. Sheridan was out front. She's going to be working with Charles in our legislative session. We've got a record legislative agenda for the Montana Chamber going into this session. Stacy Dorrington, I know she's out front. She's the one that puts together all the logistics for this thing, making sure that I get up here on time when I'm supposed to. Candace Strauss is there in the back taking pictures. Thank you, Candace, for being here. Candace is helping us with our communications and marketing. Shane Scanlon is here. Where'd Shane go? There he is. Shane's helping us out with the Montana Manufacturing Association. It's one of the association groups under the umbrella of the Montana Chamber of Commerce. And I look around this room and I see a big chunk of you folks go to our annual Governor's Cup golf tournament. And the man that's responsible for putting that on is Ed Bartlett. Where's Ed? Fast Eddie. There he is right there in the back. Ed Bartlett puts on our Governor's Cup every year, which, by the way, this last year we had a record-breaking Governor's Cup tournament. It was the best we've ever had, and so thank you. This year, we're already working on this year's upcoming Governor's Cup, and we've got a waiting list of over 15 people, or 15 different teams wanting to get into that, so that speaks to the success of that as well. Peyton Dobbs is out front. She does our communications, or our member relations, and she makes sure that all of our databases are up to date, and invoicing is out, and you're paying your dues on time. And Matt Olson, finally but not least, is our Director of Network Development. If you need someone that can plug you into another business or another individual that your business can, make a collaboration with or have a partnership with, there's nobody better in the entire state of Montana than Matt Olson in connecting those sort of dots. And so I wanted to take a minute because These sort of things are a lot of work to put on, and this staff has been working relentlessly over the last several months to put it together. So thank you to the Montana Chamber team. Now, over the course of the next couple of days, there's going to be a lot going on. And for the next 24 hours, we're going to wrap up tomorrow about noon. And you need to know that these sort of events aren't cheap to put on. They're a big, expensive sort of endeavor. And it wouldn't be possible if we didn't have great support from sponsorships. And the sponsorships is what really makes these sort of things happen. And so as you look around, you'll see sponsors. They'll have a name tag and there'll be a little white sponsor badge on it. Would you please take a minute and thank the sponsors, because it's their contribution and support of this event that makes this possible. And so I have to start out with thanking a few of those sponsors that make this possible. It's a pretty long list. We kind of broke it up a little bit here, so I'm going to go through the first part of the list, and then the chair of the Montana Chamber of Commerce, Courtney Kibblewhite, she'll go through the other part of the list. But we have to start with our hospitality suite. Healthy is Wellness is Dr. Nick Pertuit and Tony Rosanova. Thank you. They've got the hospitality suite. We thank them for their sponsorship and support. And then our lawmaker appreciation sponsor is the Navajo Transitional Energy Company. The Navajo Transitional Energy Company owns the Spring Creek Mine, which is the largest coal mine in the state of Montana. And Matthew Adams is here all the way up from Denver. And so thank you, Matthew, and the Navajo Transitional Energy Company for your support. And then our Treasure State members. And these are our investors that support us at everything that we do throughout the state. They're our top supporters, our top sponsors at every one of our events. And I need to take just a second to acknowledge the importance of our Treasure State members. These are folks that aren't our top dues-paying member for any sort of specific self-interest. These are folks that believe in Montana. These are folks that desperately want to see this economy grow. They desperately want to see this state reach its full economic potential. And I'm honored that we have Treasure State members that invest in the Montana Chamber because they recognize the value that we bring. And without them in their year-long support of everything that we do, none of this would be possible. And so I want to make sure I take a second and thank some of our Treasure State investors, all of which are here today. First Interstate Bank. Ed Garding is a former president and CEO of First Interstate Bank. He was the honorary chair when we were doing our strategic plan, led us through that sort of thing. And so thank you, First Interstate Bank and Ed Garding. Montana State Fund, always a great supporter. New Horizons Studio, that's a name you might not recognize. You might better recognize the name Hyundai. And Hyundai is the company that we recruited into the state of Montana. It's going to be opening up a new research and development facility in Bozeman. So New Horizons Studio is a Treasure State member. Northwestern Energy's got a whole table here, and there's more than this what's at this table. And this is one of those sort of companies, no matter where you go, you run into Northwestern Energy supporting the local community. So thank you, Northwestern Energy, for your support. Stockman Bank, another great Montana company. We really appreciate the support that you give to the Montana Chamber. The Glacier Bank Corps, headquartered in Kalispell, another great Treasure State member of the Montana Chamber of Commerce. And we've got a new Treasure State member that just stepped up within the last month. That's Burlington Northern Santa Fe. And so I want to thank all of them for their support, not just for being a top-level supporter for this event, but for all the activity that the Montana Chamber of Commerce does throughout the year. So can we give them a quick round of applause? We also have some additional platinum sponsors that I want to acknowledge. Applied Materials and Blue Cross Blue Shield. Colette Hansen is on our board. Thank you, Colette, for everything that you do. The Montana Department of Commerce. We've got a great partnership with the Montana Department of Commerce. We're in conversation and we're collaborating with them on a regular basis. Montana State University. The Montana University System, not to be outdone, is here. Republic Services, thank you, Chad Bauer. And not to be outdone, University of Montana and Valley Bank of Montana. Our gold level sponsors are Allegiance, Atlantic Richfield Company, Blackfoot Communications. I visited with Debbie Dantic a little bit earlier. Boeing, thank you, Boeing. Charter Communications. Fidelity Diagnostics Laboratory, Pacific Source Health Plans, and the Washington companies. And John Binion is here as well on behalf of Washington companies. And so if you would join me in thanking them for supporting the ability for us to gather this group together and be able to have this sort of networking and exchange of information. Now, as I get ready to turn over the rest of the Business Days agenda to the board chair, Courtney Kibblewhite, I'd like to also introduce and thank the board of directors for the Montana Chamber of Commerce. And so with the board of directors for the Montana Chamber of Commerce, the Montana Chamber Foundation, and the Montana Manufacturing Association, would you please stand so that we can thank you for guiding this organization through everything. And then I got one final thank you, and this is one that really means a lot to us, and I want to thank Northern News Network. Every year, Northern News Network reports live from out here in the lobby. Taylor Brown is always here, and so it's an honor to have them reporting here. There's Taylor. Thank you, Taylor. Appreciate your being here and your support. So I'd like to now turn it over to the chair of the Montana Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, Courtney Kibblewhite, and she will lead us through the rest of the program. Courtney?
I did not pick that as a walk-on song, but thank you. Thank you for that. Welcome, everyone. We are truly grateful to have you here today. I think about all of you that chose to be here and left maybe families. This might be a holiday for a number of you. I know I personally didn't realize that there was school today, so I left my husband back home to deal with that and make sure lunches got packed. But the choice of showing up to an event like this means that each of you are willing to be part of the conversation about how we do business in this state and how we do business better. And I can't thank you enough for being willing to make that commitment. All of us have watched in the news everything that's happening in other parts of the world, and isn't it an honor to get to participate in a democracy? And that's what our legislators will be doing over the next 3 or 4 months, and I really appreciate that. One thing I wanted to mention before we kick it off here, and in our staff, we have been working with the Montana Department of Agriculture over the last year, and we always talk about getting beyond the weather. And that statement is in relation to, for us, Northern Ag Network being a part of an organization that serves farmers and ranchers. And in farming and ranching, we can always just talk about the weather. And you think about that's the one universal truth. You pick up the phone, how's the weather? Where someone else is going is where someone else is at, and that gives you a moment of connection. So I just want to challenge everyone today to get beyond the weather in your conversations over the next few days. That may be getting beyond the weather to talk about someone's stance on a really hard issue. That might be getting beyond the weather to see how someone's doing, that maybe they're a little bit distracted and stressed and may need a channel to open up. But the fact that we're all here and willing to have difficult conversations, I think says a lot. And I think as leaders that show up, we can also really help set the tone. And the chamber board met earlier today, and one of the things that was mentioned is the importance of representing issues, not parties, and the power in having that nonpartisan stance and what we can do with that. And to me, that just drove home the importance of the Montana Chamber as an organization that approaches things with a curious mind, that is generous in our assumptions of other people and their intentions. And when we start conversations from that place of, I'm just really curious why you think that, or tell me more about what you meant when you said that, because in my head, here's what I think. And if we're authentic and we're willing to be vulnerable about how we look at issues, we can certainly learn something more about how someone else does. So thank you all for engaging and being here today. I hope that we'll have a lot of topics that challenge us, and I hope that you'll be willing to engage and share feedback with each other and with the chamber on how we can better support the business community in Montana. So as Todd mentioned, we are grateful to have a long list of sponsors. I've got a few more to mention. Silver level sponsors, the Crowley Fleck Law Firm, Montana's Credit Unions, and University of Washington, WWAMI. Our bronze level sponsors, Amazon, Billings Clinic, Enbridge, Montana Secretary of State's office, and Christy will be with us tomorrow to offer a few remarks. The Montana Travel Association, Payne West Insurance. I believe Kyle Ingscheit is on our foundation board, and he's in Arizona today, but appreciate his involvement. Reach Higher Montana. I saw Kelly Creswell. Thank you, Kelly. And finally, our copper sponsors, Alps, Consumer Energy Alliance, Leadership Montana, Midland Claims Service Incorporated, and Industrial Injury Claims, Montana Bankers Association, Montana Hospital Association, Montana Hydraulics, Mountain Health Co-op. Blair Fieseth is on our board. Thank you, Blair. Pinion, and Angie Murdo is on our board. This is their second official day of being able to call themselves Pinion. You'll remember Andersons or Mullen previously. And then Silverthorne Renewables. So thank you all for your support of Business Days at the Capitol. So while you continue to enjoy your meals, of course, you know the Montana Chamber advocates for business at a state level. We'll now get to hear from our delegation at the federal level. And if you're a member of our annual business meeting, Matt Rosendale dropped a few bombshells. I don't know if there's going to be any bombshells in these presentations, but you better listen to find out.
This is Senator John Tester, and while I'm sorry that I cannot be with you in person, I am grateful for the opportunity to share a few words with you. I want to start by thanking the Montana Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to speak and for all the work that you do to support businesses, especially small businesses, here in Big Sky Country. I don't have to tell you that small businesses are the backbone of Montana's economy, creating good-paying jobs and providing essential goods and services to folks in their communities. And that's why it is critical that we have access to resources, infrastructure, and capital that they need to be able to grow and thrive. We got a lot done this Congress. With your input, we defeated changes to the stepped-up basis that would have made it difficult for folks to pass their businesses over to their kids and their grandkids. And we passed a bipartisan infrastructure package to modernize the critical infrastructure that our businesses rely on. Not to mention, we got the bipartisan CHIPS Act across the finish line to bring good-paying jobs back home. But as we look ahead, there is much more to be done. We have to ensure folks have access to reliable and affordable child care. We have to address the housing accessibility issue, and we have to fund public education and workforce training so that the next generation of Montanans have the skills and the resources to support our growing economy. I'll keep working to get this stuff done, and I want to thank you again for all your work, and please know that my door is always open.
Senator Steve Daines here, and a big welcome to Business Days at the Capitol. Thank you to the Montana Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to share a few words. You know, our Montana way of life depends on the businesses that line Montana's main streets, everywhere from Eureka to Ekalaka and in between. Because small businesses are the very heart and soul of Montana communities, and they play such a key role in growing our state's economy. More than 99% of businesses in Montana are small businesses, and they employ nearly 67% of Montana workers. By the way, that's the highest percentage of any state in the country. Montana businesses have faced many obstacles over the past couple of years, battling record inflation, staffing, and supply shortages. And that's why, as your voice in the U.S. Senate, I'll continue doing everything I can to support the businesses that truly make Montana the last best place. After all, supporting Montana businesses means supporting good-paying Montana jobs and our local economies.
Hi, I'm Congressman Matt Rosendale, and I'm glad to join you virtually for the Chamber's Business Days at the Capitol. The Montana Chamber of Commerce has always been a vital partner of business owners and lawmakers in our state. From my time in the Montana State Legislature until now, I've been honored to work alongside you to pass legislation to create jobs for Montanans, ensure our state's economic health, and lay the groundwork for innovation. I want to thank you for your persistent advocacy and collaborative spirit, and I look forward to working with all of you in the future.
We'd like to congratulate Congressman Rosendale on his successful reelection and Congressman Zinke as Montana's new representative. I'm not sure how long it takes to get your communications team up and rolling, but we don't yet have a video from Congressman Zinke. We'll look forward to having him at other events. So throughout the next 2 days, we have a full agenda. We'll introduce you to a number of different subject matter experts, a number of different topics that you've come forward to us and asked the Chamber to work on, or that the Chamber is invested in over the next few days. And in order to keep the content concise, we've asked you to please reference this beautifully made Business Days at the Capitol brochure that's got all the information and bios on the different speakers. We won't go through decorating all the speakers, but we sure do appreciate their willingness to be here. So with that, we're going to officially kick off 2023 Business Days at the Capitol, and I have the pleasure of introducing the woman who actually brought me onto the Montana Chamber Board about 6 years ago, Amy Grimalis. And she's going to lead a panel, or lead a discussion for us today, I guess you'd say. There's been growth in civil litigation claims in recent years affecting business in Montana and around the nation. And the Montana Chamber will be proposing legislation this session to address some of those issues. So joining us today, the first moderator of the panel is Amy Grimalis of Crowley Fleck to lead the discussion. Welcome, Amy.
Hi, everyone. Great to see all of you, friendly faces out there. And I know this is exactly what we wanted during lunch, a conversation with lawyers, right? So I'd like to introduce Lee Mickus to the stage, too. And I don't know. I mean, I think we could, I don't know. We'll wing it.
We'll wing it.
Exactly. Okay.
Hi, everyone.
So I don't know. Lee's bio is in the beautifully done Chamber Business Days at the Capitol, but maybe we could just start a dialogue with all of you, because I don't think that we want to just speak at you for the next 40 minutes. The topic today that we are addressing is how can Montana be better for businesses from a litigation standpoint, and we kind of talk about these over the years when I've been on the Montana Chamber Board, and off and on we've talked about judicial hellholes across the country. So that's a term of art, not one we came up with, actually. But so for Lee and I, we wanted to just address a few of these things that the Montana Chamber of Commerce and a lot of you out there are working on in terms of making Montana a better place to do business. So Lee, maybe I'll let you kind of introduce yourself a little bit and talk about the work that you've been doing in that regard.
Sure. So my name is Lee Mickus. I'm a lawyer in Denver, but I'm actually a Montanan. I graduated from West High back in 1986. Can I get a go Bears? Thank you. And I'm a practicing lawyer in Montana as well as in several other states. But my passion is actually working on litigation reform issues around the country. Bringing common sense ideas to the courtrooms, because I've had the pleasure of trying cases in a number of different states, and everybody does things a little bit differently, and everybody has some good ideas, and everybody has some not so great ideas. And so the opportunities there present themselves to use our democratic process to make the litigation system more fair, more common sense, more understandable to the average folks. And so I've had the pleasure of doing that. I guess just to kind of talk generally about the climate.
Sure, why don't we start off with that?
Yeah. So
I can take your, do you want to put your notes here? Sure, yeah.
So I think a useful place to start is, why do we care? We're here at a business climate discussion, and the first thing you hear about are from two lawyers, right? How exciting can that possibly be? Let me see if I can get your attention. 3 months ago in Georgia, from a single car crash, Ford Motor Company got hit with a verdict for $1.7 billion. That's billion with a B. Over the last couple of years, Bayer and its Monsanto division over its herbicide Roundup have been hit with at least 2 verdicts in excess of $1 billion apiece. A few years before that, there was a spate of verdicts from Missouri and from New Jersey involving a product mined right here in Montana, talc, talcum powder litigation for hundreds of millions of dollars. And a few years before that, some of you may remember a case against a new friend to Montana, Hyundai Motor Company, where they got whacked for $286 million out of a single car crash. Have I got your attention? This impacts businesses because it's businesses who are on the south side of the V defending these kinds of lawsuits. I don't know if you got a chance to pick up the flyer outside. I didn't put it together, but I'm thrilled that somebody did. It gives a ranking of the states, of at least the top 10 states, in terms of the tort cost per GDP. Montana is in the top 10, number 6 to be precise. That's not something to be excited about. What that tells us is that an inefficient process, litigation and the tort system, is being used particularly inefficiently in our state. So that gives us some opportunity for things that we can do about it. Now, I want to take a step back because I don't want anybody here to have a misimpression of what the chamber is about, what businesses are about when it comes to litigation. Nobody is suggesting that courts ought to be shut down. Nobody is suggesting that lawsuits ought to go away and that courts are not a good and appropriate means of addressing disputes. They happen all the time. We need to have, in a good democratic country, in a good democratic state, an opportunity to resolve those civilly and appropriately. The courts are fine for doing that. But that doesn't mean that we can't look at the process and give some consideration to the kinds of things that make a difference. So what kinds of evidence can be considered? What kind of evidence can a defendant put forth in order to provide its defense? Who gets to participate in this process? Is it just the people who were injured? How do we measure things like damages? Those kinds of considerations are all fair play. Those are all policy level decisions that things like legislatures ought to be considering and that affect the litigation climate, that affect those costs, that affect Montana's ranking on that tort per GDP sort of scale.
That's great. Thanks, Lee. So just to kind of maybe encapsulate this on a way that pertains to all of you out there. So in America, we generally purchase, over the last couple of years, I think COVID had a little more effect, $13 trillion by Americans. We purchase things. So whether it's things for leisure, things for work, things for your home, and those things give rise to a type of case called product liability. So we're kind of pivoting our discussion now towards what are we going to be looking at for 2023 and what will be some of these changes in the law that could impact your business. So if you're a manufacturer or if you're a retailer or if you're a distributor, you are in the bucket that oftentimes gets put on, as Lee said, the south side of the V. So when you're in litigation, the defense for those things that are bought. And so in a products liability case, you have to prove first that it was defaulty, right? That there was something wrong with what you purchased, the thing. And then you have to say that there was some sort of harm to you and that you used the thing in the way that it was supposed to. So I just think sometimes we need to explain what product liability is and then why does it matter to you. We must look tired. Okay, so maybe, Lee, with that in mind, you could explain for the folks out there that are manufacturers, distributors, retailers, producers of things, what are we trying to do with this bill in Montana?
Absolutely, and you'll see an overview discussion in these glossy printouts, which I think is wonderful, and it gives a real good encapsulation of what's going on. But first I want to start with pick up where Amy was with the notion of what is product liability. So it involves a product that has injured somebody, and who is potentially on the hook for a product liability suit. And the answer is maybe not exactly what you think. Everybody in the chain of distribution, so starting from the part maker to the manufacturer or assembler to the warehouser to the retailer, everybody in that chain under Montana law right now is potentially on the hook for the full package of damages. So that's what we're talking about. Montana has taken historically a pretty, frankly, a very unique approach toward product liability. It looks at this as something that is unique and different from any other kind of lawsuit. And as a result, manufacturers and the other defendants get a very, very, very narrow window of the kinds of things that they can address in order to defend themselves, in order to put in front of the jury and say, hey, this is why I don't think there is a defect in my product and why I don't think that the product is actually what caused the injury to the individual plaintiff. Very few things. So for instance, in every other kind of tort circumstance, so a car crash, a slip and fall at a Home Depot store, there's an opportunity under Montana law for comparative faults, for the defendant to say, okay, maybe I did something that wasn't perfect, but the misuse or the inattention or the other mistakes that other folks, that the plaintiff may have made, that somebody else who is also involved in the lawsuit may have made, that all needs to be given consideration, and the jury may divide that up. In a product liability case, however, that's not an option. It's an all or nothing thing. And for me, when I have tried product liability cases in Montana, it's a challenge because I've got to go all in on something like causation and say, nope, our product is perfect, and the fact of this accident was a result of somebody else's pure negligence. We had nothing to do with it. That's a hard position to take in many circumstances. So, in terms of the bill, what does the bill do? The bill does a number of things. First off, in terms of this comparative fault issue, is to bring product liability in line with the way other states have visualized this concept and bring comparative fault into bear for manufacturers and other defendants in these kinds of cases. Give them the opportunity to say, okay, there's fault to be shared here. That's thing number one. In terms of considerations, what kind of evidence can I put forth for the jury to consider? Remarkably, even though some of the biggest challenges that manufacturers face are regulatory compliance. You've got to meet, if you're an auto manufacturer, Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards. If you're a pharmaceutical or medical device manufacturer, you've got to meet FDA requirements. Boating, it's the Coast Guard. I can go on and on and on. Those are really detailed. Those are very involved. And those are inadmissible in most courts here in Montana. That's a problem. That ought to be something, if we take the regulatory process seriously, that ought to be a prime consideration. Under the bill, it will be. Another thing that gets considered in product liability cases in most other states, but not in Montana, is the age of the product. I think we all know products wear out. You know, a tractor that's 35 years old, there may be a newer model that has better bells and whistles on it. Many states incorporate what's called a statute of repose. If a product is of a certain vintage, we can assume that it has worn out, we can assume it has become obsolete, and that's a defense for the manufacturer. That's another thing that the bill will take up, is to add a statute of repose to the Montana Product Liability Act. But the part that I get, frankly, the most excited about in this bill, and I guess I'm a law nerd when it comes to that, is what I call innocent seller protection. So I talked to you earlier how everybody in that chain of distribution is on the hook. Everybody, the retailer, the distributor, the warehouser, everybody who was involved in that product. Many states, and my home state, Colorado, now has one of the strongest innocent seller protection statutes. And what does that mean? That means in most product liability cases, the issue is the design or the warnings that come with a particular product. Sometimes it's the manufacturing, that it was assembled badly. Okay, that's a gripe between the plaintiff and the manufacturer. The distributor, the warehouser, the retailer, they had nothing to do with it. Those folks are box in, box out. They were just as surprised that an injury could arise as the plaintiff was. But yet, Montana and some other states allow those retailers or distributors to be sued just as if they were the manufacturer. I say that's not great. And so what this bill does is to protect those innocent retailers, those innocent distributors who had nothing to do with the input in providing input to the manufacturing process or to the design process. Those folks who were truly box in, box out, they get protection against product liability suits from the very outset. So they can't be dragged into the case. They can't be forced to hire their own lawyers, go through the discovery process, disrupt their business. That's not healthy, and this bill will provide benefit to that.
Great, thanks, Lee. Okay, so if you're a manufacturer, if you're in this chain and your ears have perked up, this is a bill that Senator Fitzpatrick's going to bring, and right now it only has an LC. It's 1197, as you can see in your packet. But we wanted to bring it up because later today you're going to hear from a manufacturing panel. And so whether you're Boeing or you're, one of the other new business entities that has been described before in Montana, we want you to know that this is a bill that we're bringing on behalf of all the manufacturing, distribution, and retail sector, and by that I mean the Montana Chamber. And so we think it's something just to highlight for you to watch. You might say, well, why are we bringing this? Well, there are 3 separate branches of government. One makes the laws, that's the legislature starting today. There's the executive branch, of course, with the governor and all of those agencies affiliated. And then we have the judicial branch. And so what we have in Montana sometimes is an interpretation by one of those branches, and that might be the judiciary. So we are trying to be crystal clear with the legislature that we have coming forward about what we want the Montana law to be in these sectors. So just want to bring that home as to why the Montana Chamber is bringing that bill. The other thing I'd like to do is have a little crowd participation. Raise your hand if you would like to be sued in Montana. Okay, good. You're all paying attention. All right, now raise your hand if you are sued, if you would like to know who is funding the suit against you. Okay, you should all raise your hand, just so you know. That was a softball. As I had to get a little activity out there. Okay, so the next bill that we're going to talk about is one that some folks in the audience have also been working on very hard. And this one has had a couple of articles written about it, and it's called The Hidden Money of Lawsuits. And so why I asked if you'd like to know who's suing you, it's because there are entities in America that shockingly make money off of suing other people. And they are funding it, and they're called third parties. So what that means in legal speak is there's the person who's suing, there's the person who's being sued, so they are on both sides of the V, as Lee said in the court proceedings. And then there's kind of this other entity out there, and they're funding it. And so across the country, we haven't seen this as much in Montana yet, but across the country, this wave is happening. And in fact, I was at a meeting in Philadelphia in October where a client of this nature pitched that they would like to move into Montana, and would I like to lobby for them? Which I was like, that would be a no. But they are funding these lawsuits, so whether they're class action lawsuits or they're other types of lawsuits. So what this bill that Lee's going to give a little bit more on is going to bring is some clarity out there, some transparency in terms of who is financing litigation. So Lee, do you want to expound on that a little bit?
Let me talk a little bit about this, because this is something that doesn't get a whole lot of attention, third-party litigation financing. And it doesn't get a lot of attention, or hasn't, because this exists in the shadows. You haven't heard about it because they're hiding. And the funders of this are pretty explicit that they don't want to be mentioned. How big is this industry? Well, nobody knows for sure because it is conducted in the shadows. There's no reporting requirement. Most of these lenders aren't required to register in a particular state. Usually it's done on a handshake agreement between plaintiff's counsel or the plaintiff, him or herself, and this funder. But how big is this industry? We know it's in the billions. It's at least $8 billion a year nationally, might be as high as $20 billion. Why is this a problem? I mean, isn't this just an access to justice thing? And we want everybody to have a chance to advance their court case. Why is it a problem? Because it is uncontrolled and it's a little scary. Some of these litigation financing requirements end up with the plaintiff on the hook for an interest rate in excess of 60%, 60. All right. Would anybody sign up for a credit card that carries a 60% interest rate? I don't think so. Many times, the third-party litigation funders get a veto on settlement proposals. They can go back and say, no, that's not enough. We're not going to do it. We're going to force this case forward. And what does that mean? Greater expenses, less opportunity for resolving a matter, longer time frame, more business disruption, not a healthy situation. So how do we address this? The first way to address this is to bring it out of the shadows. Make sure that these litigation financiers are registered in the state so we know who they are. I mean, if they're going to be doing this business here, we ought to at least have that information. Next step, which I think is critically important, and some states are starting to take action. West Virginia and Wisconsin have taken this action already. New Jersey has had it in place for a while, is simply disclose in a court case. In every court case right now in Montana, the presence of insurance has to be disclosed by a defendant. They've got to put it out there that State Farm or Allstate or Great American is involved and they've got coverage that applies. Why then are third-party financiers who have an interest in the outcome of the litigation not similarly and symmetrically required to be put out there so that the court knows that they're there, so that the other party knows that they're there? They're not right now, and that's one of the things that this bill will do. Another piece of what it will do, I mentioned, is that some of the interest rates that plaintiffs get charged are in the 50-60% range. This puts some limits on that. They've got to operate within the acceptable range of interest rates that Montana will allow. So just some very basic things to bring this practice out of the shadows, let people understand who they are dealing with, and make people deal with these litigation contracting on the same basis that other consumer contracts, consumer financing arrangements would be required to do.
Thanks, Lee. Okay, so I'm going to kind of turn to you all in the audience. I know some of you have questions out there. I may have planted one. And just ask if there are some other issues that you all would like to share that are in kind of the litigation area and that would help businesses going forward. So with that, I think someone is moving for a mic. Sorry, I apologize.
Looking for a mic.
Okay.
I want to address it because I've painted kind of a gloomy picture, and I don't want to leave that impression with you, because there have actually been some great progress in the last legislative session. And shout out to my friend Bridger Malem, who worked on this bill in the last legislative session. So one of them that a change that was made that frankly makes Montana the leader, as far as I'm concerned, and I work on this issue all over the country, is the measure of recoverable medical expense damages. That was an issue that was remarkably very complicated. I mean, you would think, okay, somebody gets injured, the doctor gets paid, that's that, right? Well, there's a complicated legal doctrine called the collateral source rule that just messes it up, and it was a really, really challenging circumstance to figure out what is that number. Well, this bill makes it clear and brings a very common sense solution to it. What a plaintiff can recover for medical expense damages is what money, the amount of money that changed hands, the amount of money that the doctor is paid by the insurance company. And everyone who has had the pleasure of looking at a Blue Cross Blue Shield invoice knows that there's a top line number that comes from the hospital, and then there'll be some contractual discounts or some disallowed amounts, and then there's a bottom line number, and that's what the doctor gets paid. That's what this bill does. It defines medical expense damages at that level, and you think, of course, is the answer. In many other states, that's not the answer. So congrats to Bridger for getting that through. Congratulations to Senator Kerry Smith and to Representative Durham that carried that bill in the last session. It really is a wonderful step forward. So I don't want you to think it's all doom and gloom, because it's not.
Right. Thank you for highlighting that, Lee. And I guess, you have two lawyers up here. We've represented business at Crowley Fleck. They're the primary group that we work with for many, many years. And I can just tell you that both of us feel very strongly that having an equal playing field when you're going to be sued is really what you want. And you want certainty, just like you all want in your business sector. And so that's why the Chamber put this on the agenda, is because it's been a real focus of the Chamber, because our businesses have said it's a focus for us. And I think, one of the other things we do is we have at the Chamber a Justice Coalition, and so I want to thank David Bell for chairing that. He's here in the room, and it's an enormous amount of effort, and it tries to put all of this together. Lee serves on that. It's open if any of you are interested in being on that. But with that, I know we have a couple mics now, so is there anybody that would like to? Yes, thank you.
Hi, Brett Doney from Great Falls Development Authority. Would the transparency and litigation bill cover donations to nonprofits that then fuel litigation?
I'd have to look at the language in that bill. I'm not sure. Have you looked, Lee?
I've looked, but not with that particularly in mind.
I don't think so.
I think the answer is probably not. This is aimed more at commercial investors, hedge funds, things like that are funding litigation with an eye toward getting a return out. And so this sort of a nonprofit, I don't think would meet those definitions.
Right. Thank you for the question, though. Oh, great. We have another one.
Hi, my name is Katie Whitmore. I'm with Woods Power Grip. What are some of the ways that other states are addressing these issues? And then kind of as a follow-up to that, should we focus on fixes on a national level or a state level more?
Well, thanks, Katie, and congratulations to you and Brian for being one of the great manufacturers of the year with the Chamber. I'm going to let you take that, Lee. I think we want to start here at home in Montana. It's what we can work on here, but I do know that Montana is a member of the U.S. Chamber, our Chamber, and we work on issues. So, Lee, do you want to address other states' best practices?
Yeah, so in the product liability bill, what you see are, frankly, some of the best practices that we see around the states. They're not just, the bill isn't pulled whole cloth from Colorado or Tennessee or someplace else. It is rifle shots from different states with some of their best ideas. So North Carolina has a statute of repose, but some others don't. Another element of that product liability bill that I didn't mention is the requirement that the plaintiff prove that a safer alternative design exists, because that's not always the case. That's an element in these kinds of cases that some states have adopted. Montana, for whatever reason, has not. So what you see, and the innocent seller protection that I mentioned and I'm so excited about, that itself is an amalgamation of ideas from a number of different states. So I think what you see, I would like to think, because I had a hand in drafting it, that what you see in the product liability bill is exactly what you're sort of suggesting that we're taking best practices from around the country and bringing them to Montana. And we're not jettisoning Montana law entirely, as Amy suggested. We are building it on the culture and the approach that Montana law generally has taken, and trying to modernize it and bring those best practices to bear in Montana's courts.
Right, thanks, Lee. Did that answer your, thanks, Katie. Yes. Oh, Charles.
Thanks, Amy. I'll just affirm what Lee said. I think he was exactly correct, but just to dispel any question on the third-party litigation financing transparency, there is no provision that would prevent gifts or advocacy. There are organizations that want to support through giving or support through advocacy, and they desire anonymity. And this bill doesn't do anything to affect that. These are organizations that invest for a financial stake, as you pointed out, oftentimes an egregiously high financial stake with these litigation financing activities. So, kind of second part, I'll just kind of maybe tee up for one of the other bills that you have listed in the priority list, which is the time-limited demands. I could just, I feel like Max Headroom come up. While somebody else searches for a better mic. So from a time-limited demands perspective, the rate of cost for insurance in every state, including ours, is a reflection of the risk in that state. Thank you, Matt. And one of the dynamics that exists here, like it does around the country, is the creative way that the plaintiffs' bar can set insurance companies up. And when that happens, the cost of that consequence is passed on to consumers. And there will be a panel and some information tomorrow that will give evidence from NAIC, the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, reports on how Montana's premiums stack up relative to our neighboring states. But for example, and then Lee, I'll just turn this over to you and ask for your thoughts on this. To make it real to the broadest population, take an auto insurance where the Montanan buys the lowest possible limit. And in Montana, the way the insurance law works is an insurer has an obligation to get the policyholder out of a claim within policy limits if such an opportunity presents itself and it's fair and reasonable. And if the insurance carrier does not do that, then it uncaps the limit. So if the limit was $250,000 and the premium paid was reflective of a limit that was $250,000, and a plaintiff's attorney makes a time-limited demand saying, this accident occurred, we want the $250,000 policy limit payment, you have 10 days to get back to us. But they don't provide the information that the carrier needs to assess the damage, to determine whether there is any liability, much less whether it's a full policy limit. And so it's a tactic, and if the carrier doesn't get back within this arbitrarily chosen 10 days, for example, and it is a hypothetical, but it is very real on what's going on, then the limit's uncapped, and now there's more than $250,000 available. So, Lee, I just kind of turn it to you if you have anything to offer on that.
Yeah, I think you've described that situation very, very well. And look, again, it's easy to look at insurance companies and say, okay, insurance company bad. But the reality is insurance companies are in many respects a backbone of business. If for instance, trucking companies can't get insurance or can't get it at a reasonable rate, then they end up going out of business. And so these kinds of demands, they happen, and unfortunately Montana is a little bit more open to those kinds of demands than many other states would allow. And as a result of that, it puts an insurer in an impossible situation. If a demand like that is made and they don't have, for instance, the medical history of the plaintiff, so we don't know really what the injuries are. We don't know if these injuries were actually pre-existing of the accident, things like that. Then there's no way to realistically evaluate that claim. And so then they are faced with the classic Hobson's choice of either I take the claim, I pay the money, pay the ransom, and end it, or I gamble, and if I do so, I'm doing it with unlimited money, whereas otherwise the limit would apply. And that's just a classically unfair situation. It's an abusive tactic by plaintiffs and their counsel in order to put an insurer in that Hobson's choice so they don't know, they're buying the pig in a poke. They don't know what it is they're getting because they haven't had a chance and a reasonable opportunity in order to evaluate the claim. So that bill that is also part of the package, I think, is going to take a good bite out of that abusive practice and bring things into a much more common sense approach, a much more fair approach that allows these claims to be evaluated and resolved and still holds insurers accountable. Absolutely. I mean, the bad faith presence is still there. It's just that the unfair pressure on them is going to be diminished.
Yes, so thanks, Mr. Bell, for that question, and thank you for the answer. So let me kind of, I always try to figure out, like, how can I make this make sense to people who aren't lawyers, because sometimes we speak in tongues a little bit. So raise your hand if you ski, or if you have a family member that likes to ski. Some of us did that this winter break, right? Okay, so let's just apply that in that case. So there's a lot of ski areas in Montana. So I have to be full disclosure. I represent insurance companies. I also represent the Montana Ski Area Association. And so there are some big ski areas in Montana that don't need to go named, but there are some small ones that are really on a shoestring, and we love them, right? So if you hit a rock in Montana on a ski area, and you go down and you decide you're going to sue that ski area, right, for negligence, this change will then go into effect, because what it will say is there's an insurer for that ski area, and how do they get that claim resolved as quickly as possible with all the information that they should have, right? Because we want the Great Divides and the showdowns of the world to be able to continue operating just like the big skies and the white fishes, right? So just kind of thinking about how does that actually work, because there are lots of people that sue, and in fact we have a case that our law firm defended. It's public knowledge, where an anesthesiologist from California did exactly that, hit a rock, fell down, twisted his ankle, and sued. And so resolving those claims efficiently is really an important thing for businesses, and knowing what those medical records look like. So just want to kind of explain how that works in the real world. I hope that's helpful, because I know it's after lunch and before sugar. So, and we are going to give you 5 minutes back of your lives to go to the bathroom before the next panel. But are there some more questions? Great. Okay.
Scott Sainer with First Security Bank Bozeman, also the chair for the Montana Manufacturing Association. These reforms seem pretty straightforward and common sense. What opposition do you anticipate during the session?
Did we record that they seem straightforward and common sense? Can we quote you, Scott? Great. Well, I mean, for those of you, I've only been doing this for a little over 20 years, but nothing is easy at the legislature. I mean, it's always an entertaining adventure, but for 90 days, I think we have a great team that have been working on these, Scott, for a very long time, and explaining why these are important changes to Montana law for businesses and for all of the consumers that live in this state, and our folks that reside here full-time and part-time. I know, Lee, any other insights?
I really don't think so. I mean, you would know more than anyone what's going on in the Capitol. But
I'd
I'd like to think they are indeed simple and straightforward. They are in law in many other states, and they work just fine. People still get their opportunity to have their day in court if it's justified. But this provides a base level of fairness to manufacturers that right now just isn't present in Montana.
Right, and I do want to just maybe put a point on one other thing we've said out here. You know, the litigation system works generally well in America, and so there are plaintiffs' lawyers for a reason. There are things that need to be corrected. There's a defense bar that we're members of that also works for a reason in that side of the civil field of law. But, you know, what we're trying to do here is bring a few things forward that, as you said, Scott, so eloquently, make sense, they're straightforward, and we hope that they actually better people's lives from a business and a personal respect. So I guess on that note, I want to thank Lee. He's tirelessly, I know there's a lot of lawyer jokes out there, but has been not paid to work on a lot of these really important bills, and we need litigators. There are folks at my firm that have spent quite a bit of time. ALPS has put quite a bit of time into this with David Bell's leadership. You know, having all of you give your ideas and cases that you've been sued and you think maybe we could change this in Montana. It's an ongoing discussion, and so it doesn't end here at the 2023 legislature. It continues on. So just want to put that little plea out there. I want to say thank you to Lee for being really wonderful up here, and thank you to the chamber, and you all have a few extra minutes. The next panel starts in 9 minutes at 1:15. So thank you.